everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Tabletop Crowd. I'm your host, Kristin, and I'm here tonight with a very special guest, Jessica Greyer, and we're going to be talking about her game, The Means of Magick, which is a fantasy game where you fight back against megacorps and their cataclysmic pursuit of magic. Jessica, thank you so much for joining me. Just realized I called you Jessica. Is it Jessica or Jess?
Either is fine.
Okay.
I'm Jess or Jessica. I usually introduce myself as Jess. I use she or they pronouns. And yeah, thank you so much, Kristin, for inviting me on. I'm so excited to talk about this game and to talk with you because we were talking earlier and it's been a while.
It has been a while. I'm so glad you can join me. For the folks who don't know you who are listening, could you please go ahead and introduce yourself? And then if you want, just tell us a little bit about the game.
Yeah, sure thing. I am one half of Wannabe Games, and it's just me and my partner, Alex, and we are just a small indie game company that does a lot of anti-capitalist games. That tends to be our thing. We did Moonpunk. We kickstarted that, 2019, something like that, 2019, I think. And that came out in 2020, and that was our first big release. Previously, we had done some small micro games, and this is our next big release coming on the heels of that. And we decided, we're kind of into that anti-corporate, anti-capitalist theme, and that's where the Means of Magick comes in. So if you're curious about the name, we really struggled with that for a while. We settled on the Means of Magick because this game is all about magic as a form of power and a form of capital and a form of technology and control. So in the world of the game, there are big megacorps they basically have a monopoly on the natural resource that is magic. And you play as characters who are probably oppressed by these systems in some way. And you are trying to protect both your communities and the planet from the ravages of these corporations. So we're just exploring a lot of themes of like environmentalism and workers' rights and what it means to belong in a community and thrive as individuals and small groups when it seems like there's so much going against you.
That's a very cool theme. It does remind me a little bit of Moonpunk. It obviously is very different with the addition of like the magic. So I know it's a completely different game, but I love that you've kept a theme that it seems like maybe you and Alex are pretty passionate about since it shows up in some of your big games. What inspired you, or what first gave you and or Alex the idea to even make this game?
We were actually in the car talking about his hometown and how it seems like a lot of the things that people do in his hometown back in Vermont, when you're poor and you don't have a lot going on in your life, what do you turn to? And we started getting into this conversation about I don't know how it devolved into a talk on miners in Virginia, but we started talking about miners in Virginia and what if magic was a natural resource? What would people in power be doing to get this magic? How would that affect the world? And that kind of started inspiring that. But it's been in the works for a long time. Since around the time we started Moonpunk is when we have been talking about this and kind of developing it. Obviously, it started off this very nebulous, weird conversation. But now there was that inspiration. And then also during the pandemic, the early stages of the pandemic, Final Fantasy VII, the remake came out, and Final Fantasy VII, is, you got Shinra, and you have all of this cool tech and also magic and, environmentalism and Sephiroth. You have all these fun things, and we like that. We both like that game, and a lot of that has inspired this one.
I'm embarrassed to admit I have not played Final Fantasy VII.
I haven't played it since the PlayStation version, like the original PlayStation. I watched Alex play the remake, which was a completely enjoyable experience. It's mostly the cutscenes. I don't really care about the turn-based,
Is it only for, I could absolutely look this up myself, but maybe is it only for PlayStation?
I think so.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that. I honestly think it is, but.
Okay. I have a question. So I definitely have questions about this game because I'm very excited about it. But before we dive too deep into the game talk, I also design games with my partner. So I'm curious to see if you don't mind talking just a little bit about what it's like to design games like with your partner. Like, do you have a process? What does that process look like? That sort of thing, co-designing.
Yeah, co-designing a game, I feel like it doesn't get talked about a lot in the industry, but a lot of people do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of couples do it. There are some couple game designers I didn't know were couples and designing games together that I've learned about recently. But for us, it works out really well. We have a lot of similar interests, and we have long, rambling, weird conversations about media and politics and things that are happening in our lives. And we both have this shared interest in games.
Mm-hmm.
It was a couple years back in, I think maybe 2019, maybe 28. I cannot remember time. Time does not exist right now.
It does not exist.
But we went to the Joko cruise, which is like this nerd boat cruise with Jonathan Colton. And we talked to some game designers there. We just started chatting about how cool would it be if we made our own game? Wait, you want to make a game too? I want to make a game. No one's stopping us from doing this. And we both have each other's back. And it was just so much easier to get into it when you had someone else with you in the process. For me, I have this brain thing that makes it really hard for me to stay focused on one project and actually see it to completion. With Alex on my side, he kind of makes me do it. Like I have to, he won't let me drop the project and move on to something else. He is kind of like his strengths of that motivation factor and the organization factor really play off of where my strengths are, which is short bursts of a lot of energy and then maybe forget about the project forever. So we play off of each other's strengths like that. I think sometimes though, the fact that we are, we're a romantic couple, we live together. So there's all of that intertwined within it, which can complicate things. Because you don't want to take things personally when you're working with somebody. Like if they're your coworker, which technically I guess he is, right. You don't really want to put that bad energy, which can happen during difficult conversations and disagreements in games, back into your personal relationship. But that can be hard sometimes because we're both so passionate about the game design. It's hard to separate that from what's going on like in our own lives because it's so intertwined.
Yeah, that makes sense. I sometimes will like preface a statement or a question to Tim where I will say, okay, I'm all business. And then he knows that he can just, because he's a very logical, straightforward person. So then he knows he can just be very straightforward. Or I will say, okay, I need your response to be a little softer so that he can kind of filter it. But you're right. It is definitely intertwined. And so it can be wonderful. And then it's sometimes challenging, which all relationships and all co-designing, right, can be challenging. It's just interesting when you are either romantically involved or living with the person that you're co-designing with.
Right. I mean, even a friendship, I can imagine that could be rough on a friendship sometimes. I don't envy people who have, really fiery, intense, head batting kinds of co-working relationships. Because Alex and I don't have that. We have disagreements in design sometimes, but it's not often. But I know people who work together who are fire and ice. And I'm glad that that's not us. I don't know how I would live with that. It might be like, okay, I'm going to be the wannabe. You can be games over there. I'm just going to.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true. Okay. So I love that this idea originally was born from a conversation you were having like in the car while driving. I feel like that's extremely relatable. Just diving in a little bit more to the game itself now, what system are you using?
So this is a system of our own design. Moonpunk was powered by the Apocalypse game, so we kind of had a framework set up for that. But this is a system that we use called, we've given it a name, so we feel very fancy about it. It's called the Pace Die system or the Pace system. And this actually came out of a mini game, a micro game that we designed together live on Twitch called 10 Paces, which is an Old West dueling game. And that was also inspired by My Mecha Has Shark Arms, which is a silly mech game where you can play a mecha that has shark arms.
I want to do that.
Someone explained to me early in that process the difference between mech and mecha, but I cannot remember what it is anymore. So if you remember, if that was you, tell me, send me a message. I need to remember. But what it is kind of, it's a system where you are rolling to try to, you're building up a meter. You're increasing that meter. Again, very Final Fantasy-esque, like getting to your ultimate move or whatever is happening. And when you hit that number, you go over that number, a stress break happens. And narratively, that can cause something bad to happen. Like maybe you blow your cool, or maybe you become a coward and you run away, or you lash out at your friends. But mechanically, you will get something good will happen during that. I'm not explaining that terrifically well. Alex is so much better at explaining mechanics than I am, but what we hope that does is builds tension within a scene to lead to an explosion within that scene. So a lot of drama, a lot of excitement and customizability. We want this, a lot of customization in the game. So there are no set classes. There are no set even spells. You can make your own everything here. We just have a framework for that to happen. So if you wanted to play a barbarian in the game, let's say there's not a class for barbarian like there is in the big game.
Right.
But you could say, okay, yeah, my stress break happens. When I have a stress break, I lash out. Hopefully there is an enemy next to me that I can lash out with, or maybe I start yelling at the person next to me for making a mistake. And that can cause some inner character conflict, which I love. I love digging into that in games. Same. And then for spells too, you can just build based off of a set of different characteristics of a spell. So whatever you want, you can be a shadow wizard, or you can be a someone who summons puppies. It doesn't matter. It's a negotiation at the table and within the mechanics of the game.
That is very cool. I like that there is a stress break. And I was going to ask you if that stress break triggers something that is more action, like a fight scene, or if it's causing tension in relationships, but it sounds like it's both.
It is both. It is both. Mm-hmm. So the stress breaks can happen within the combat, but they can also happen within social scenes. So okay. It works both ways there. Or when you're, like, let's say you are in a stressful situation, we have a guideline where you have to roll for something if it would take your, you would spend concentration on something and roll for it if it would take your mind off the road if you were going 70 miles per hour down the highway. Mm-hmm. So you could maybe say a couple words or have a chat with someone next to you. You could fiddle with the radio. You can turn the windshield wipers on. That's not going to distract you. But to have a really heated argument with the person in the seat next to you, or to turn around and rummage in your suitcase, those would be things that you would that would bump up that stress, the meter toward that stress break. So if you were a rogue, I keep using these archetypes that everyone knows, so forgive me, those things don't exist in the game. But if you were trying to unlock a door before guards snuck up on you, every time you try, you might not succeed, but you can keep trying until you hit that break, and then something happens mechanically and narratively.
I was going to say, is what happens up to the player, the GM, or is it pre-written?
So for the combat stress breaks, that is something that you would decide ahead of time when you're designing your character. These things can change as your character grows and evolves, but it is not just up to the book to decide or the GM to decide, but it is a negotiation with mostly yourself. Like the character has a lot of control and agency over, the player has a lot of control and agency over their character. But what works for the table and what has been talked about in your session 0, what you want out of the game should influence that. A player who is, trying to be a good player and collaborative with the rest of the table will make sure that it's not like, yeah, my stress break means I turn into Super Saiyan and I can kick anybody's butt. that's not going to work, right? Unless
Right.
maybe you want to play Super Saiyans and they get sure, I guess, but maybe not what I would play.
So it's funny because I know that you're using examples that everyone's familiar with, which is great. I think that's helpful. So as soon as you said barbarian, I'm immediately thinking of like small towns and taverns where we're meeting up for quests. But then I heard you mention car, and then my brain was like, oh no,
No.
how do I come to terms with this? So do you have lore included in the book, or is there world building? What is the setting like?
There is a lot of lore and world building in the book, and that was kind of my job. Alex was the mechanics guy. We set the game in what you might call the post-Magic Industrial Revolution. So there are no cars, there are no combustion engines for a very specific reason. You have a combustion engine, that's going to be really, really easy for someone to ignite instantly if they want to blow up your car, for example, which in the world, maybe they would have good reason to do so. Or magic influences from just the world, because the world is infused with magic, might blow that up too. There's also no technology beyond something that might be wired. So think like telegrams or even wired telephone communications. No Wi-Fi or radio even communication. And the reason for that is in our world, this magic that's throughout the world kind of forms a web over everything. So those are your ley lines. And these ley lines intersect and they cause interference in technology specifically. And that has kind of messed up maybe some of the technological advances that some of these corporations might want. But it has also created, because of their quest for technology and power too, a group of sentient, this is one of the factions in the game, a group of sentient robots called the Feyei, who I am incorporating what I love about artificial intelligence and what I love about fairy lore all in one. So the Feyei are they're sentient, they are technology brought to life by magic. So if something gets too advanced, you start making a little bit of like computer chip stuff, this magic can bring it to life and it starts walking off and doing its own thing. And we've organized those into high elves and low elves. So high elves are like your iRobot robots that, they're almost human, like uncanny valley kind of stuff. And then there are low elves, which might be something like a drone, this drone that was brought to life by magic, and maybe it still is completing some of its functionality in a town. It's dropping off packages or something, or picking up packages. We thought about one of our fun characters that we'll have in the book, so you can view it and maybe do something with it in your game, is a Santa Claus type character, which is just going to be an incredibly, incredibly creepy AI that loves children and will leave them presents, and will always do so on the winter solstice. So I like to include, I love Fae and fairy and elves and all of that. So there's lore about giving them your full name, and there's lore about are they moral? Are they good? Are they evil? Are they neither? What are they? Kings and queens of elves and things like that. I really wanted them to be kind of ethereal and also tech, if that makes any sense. I hope it does. I hope it comes out well in the game that way, but I want them to be creepy and also fun.
Yeah. I wrote down sentient Fey robots, which may be my favorite note I've ever taken during an interview.
Yeah, they're my favorite. They're my absolute favorite.
Hey, Kitty.
Hey, Amber.
I have a question for you.
All right, shoot.
Of all the planeswalkers, which one's butt do you want to touch the most?
Let's go with my gut. Karn. That ass is sculpted. Literally.
Speaking of butts, you better believe this is Red Mage, Blue Mage. Kitty, I'm really bad at this. That's our awesome Magic the Gathering podcast on the Geekspective Network. Oh my god, I can't stop laughing.
And neither can you. when you're listening to us talk about magic and lore and how to build commander decks and Oathbreaker decks, and us actually playing against each other, which is my favorite part.
Right, and you can hear us do all these things on Spotify, iTunes, or other major platforms like YouTube now as well.
And you can also send dank memes at us, dank magic memes at RedBlueMTG. We're down for that,
Yeah,
sure.
the danker the better.
That's what I always say.
All right, bye.
The other factions are some of the megacorps. So there's Presto, which is very Amazon-esque. They're not really down with, they don't do a lot in magic. They're more about work and like workforce and manpower. There is Normal Corp, which is if you wanted to pick any of them to be very evil, it would be that one. They are legally distinct from SpaceX, legally distinct from Tesla. But they are very much interested in magic and technology. And then there's also Think, which is they are like hoity-toity, better than you, but always watching people. So you mentioned taverns and towns. There would actually be like, maybe there's a tavern with quests and things, and it's run by one of these corporations, or maybe a shell company for the corporation, because every quest you do, one of these corporations is going to get some information on you. So as the GM, you can start picking those aside and gathering intel on your own, because you as a GM in the game are your own character too. You get to have fun with what's going on, and play with and make certain moves to make the world feel real and fun for you as you're running the game.
Right. Very important. I'm really glad that you thought of the GM as well.
I GM so much. I have to think of it.
You
like,
have
I want,
to think
I
of
want
it.
a design for me. Yeah.
That makes sense. Are these factions, the way they tie in, when I think of factions, I think of Blades in the Dark, which I know many other games have factions. That's just what I think of. So will players or GMs build additional factions, or are these the factions that they're going to interact with during the game?
Players and GMs can definitely build their own factions. In fact, the player factions are important in the game. When you design your character, you design what community you came from, what culture you came from, and there are questions based on what your community that you're this little mini faction that you're creating. There are questions in the game to help you develop your own skills. So thinking about if you really fit in with your community, what's something that influenced you that you're bringing from that? What's something that everybody has, or what's something that makes you different? So you are trying to make your character feel grounded and real in the world to give you a personal stake in wanting to save it, since the environmentalism portion is important. It's really tempting in a lot of like cyberpunk games, for example. And it was something that we tried really hard to avoid in Moonpunk too. The temptation to go on a loot quest, to want to pursue maybe the same kinds of things that these corporations would want to pursue. But that's not the kind of game we wanted to make. We wanted to make a game where you are thinking more of you're thinking of a good beyond just your own personal gain. But we just wanted the stakes. You want to have these stakes so you feel like you have something that you want to protect, because everyone has something that they want to protect.
Mm-hmm.
If I heard that an alien invasion was descending on my hometown, even though I don't really like my hometown, I wanted to move away as soon as possible, I would go back and fight aliens who were trying to invade my hometown. Of course I would. I think most people would. So having that culture and that sense of community that you're coming from as a character, I wanted to give guidelines for the players to make that happen.
I love that. I do want to ask a little bit more about character creation, but one final thing on the lore, which again, sentient Fey robots. It's just my favorite. Are there any like world building or setup questions as folks get started, or are they going to play? Is there enough lore that there's not really a need for world building or setup questions?
We have set up questions in the character creation portion. It is definitely something that you would sit down for your session 0. The session 0 is going to be really important in this game, or at least like something that you have to do together to start creating this world, but you could pick it up pretty easily and just play in the stuff that we've given you, because you will be developing a couple of these cultures and communities as you go. So yes and no, I guess would be the answer to that.
No, that makes complete sense. Like there's enough built out that you could kind of, like you said, maybe do like just sit down and go. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to run a longer game, or for those of us who just really enjoy a session 0 for lots of reasons, mm-hmm. having that is always helpful. Thank you. Going back to character creation, I'm always interested in relationship questions. So whatever you can share. I know that sometimes I always like to remind the audience, I know sometimes when we are talking about crowdfunding projects, designers are not always either ready to or able to discuss the game in full yet. So anything that you can share about character creation, and if there are relationship questions, because again, I love those.
I love them too. It's my favorite thing, like doing the links, and like, especially for those Powered by the Apocalypse games, I love setting that up and I love listening to it as a GM. We don't actually have a lot of that scoped out, but knowing me and how I develop things, it's going to end up in there. What we're imagining, I mean, all the characters could definitely come from different places and different communities, or have different connections to these factions, or no connections to them in one way or another. But, with the session 0, there's got to be, in my opinion, there's got to be hey, why are you all here together? Mm-hmm. Or maybe they are all just running up on the same scene. They're all strangers on a train. But knowing me, it's going to end up in there. I don't think we have that quite fleshed out yet.
Yeah, completely understandable. It is early in the process, I know. Okay, a couple other things. I'm just curious about how long. This is always such a tricky question, right? Because you can play games for so long, but do you see this being more of a campaign versus a one shot? Or
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. I wanted to make a game that I wanted to play. Mm-hmm. That was, behind the scenes the entire time. I'm thinking, I want to play this and I'm going to play it with some people. What kind of campaign would I like? Because I love long form campaigns. I think that you could definitely do a one shot with it though. Would you be able to, you wouldn't really be able to develop your character personally, but that's kind of the deal with one shots anyway. Yep. But we will have some setup adventures in the book too, just to kind of get you started. And we should also have a play test, like a public play test ready. Don't quote me on that, but we're trying to get that for the Kickstarter, so backers can have that and view that and start playing around with it.
I love that, like a link to an actual play on your Kickstarter page at some point. Is that what you mean?
No, like a link. Okay. Like if you want to play some of this document, like
that's even cooler. Okay.
Our Discord at Wannabe Games, we try to be open and transparent about basically everything that we do.
Yeah.
Whether that's our policies on payment and profit sharing, or whether it's our design itself. Our Discord, our Wannabe Games Discord, has links to our folders of our works in progress. We're fine with sharing what we have and what we're working on.
Yeah, I like that. And then folks can get a real feel for it before it even fully comes out.
Yeah.
How many, I know this is kind of a basic question, but it's one that I always like to get a feel for. How many players would you say, like, what's the sweet spot for this game in terms of number of players?
I think it's probably the sweet spot that any kind of fantasy game where there's maybe a little bit of combat involved would have. And that would probably be that 3 to 5 range. That would be where I would play it. But we have played it with just 2 people. So that has worked out okay.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that would be ideal.
Right.
I would love to be able to make a game. I don't feel like I have that skill set yet, but to be able to make a game where you can play with as many or as few people as you'd like, I would love to have that kind of power.
Yeah. I'm always a little, I don't know that I've actually ever seen a game that is like 2 to 15 players, but that would be, I think, way too broad. So 3 to 5. Yeah. Sounds exactly in that sweet spot.
Well, you know, in the LARP we call life, you know, there are 8 billion of us. So
Exactly. I did want to ask you about playtesting. Depending on the game, I'm of the mindset that not every game needs to be play tested, right? It depends on your game. It depends on how you feel about that as the designer. So knowing that, did you guys play test, or did you all play test, and how was that process if you did?
Yeah, we did play test. I'm actually with you on this. Like I said, we got our start in making micro games, and we would design them live on Twitch, and then we would release them sometimes the next day. Mm-hmm. Obviously, no play testing was happening there. With Moonpunk, we did some playtesting, just very light playtesting, but we didn't do too much of it. But for this game, we've already done a couple steps of playtesting with our original mechanic, because we've had these 2 games that preceded this that were leading up to it, you know, inspirational factors that we had designed. So we've playtested those just to make sure that works. Alex and I sat down and ran simulations essentially based on like, what would a scene like this look like? How would it work? And then we are going to have different playtest groups working on this for us before we do release the full game. So this is my first time doing like some heavy playtesting, but I've had the fortune to have seen a game designer work on a game like from start to finish and be involved in some of the playtesting for that before. So I'm taking inspiration from him. Thanks, Bryce Whitaker. Thank you. I was involved in some of the Hood playtesting. Awesome. And like knowing kind of how he ran things, I'm taking inspiration from that. And I'm also taking inspiration from my GM back in Michigan, who I had to unfortunately abandon when I moved to Chicago recently. He also did playtesting for his homebrew game. So I've been involved with like basically the number crunchy part of playtesting, which doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but it really is. Like, okay, start over. Now we're gonna try this. Okay, start over. Now we're gonna do this scene, but now there's a witch. But you know, all this fun stuff that you can do when you're playtesting. It's just hard sometimes because it is labor. You know, playtesting is labor. You're doing work for somebody. But we're an indie company, but we also have these values where we believe truly that everyone deserves the fair share of their labor, but we're also hiring freelancers. It's weird. That's the hard part for me.
That makes sense. I've playtested many games. I mean, not many, but I've playtested quite a few games, and I happily did it. I happily did it. I know the designers, I would do it again in a heartbeat. It does not seem like playtesting is something that is paid in our industry.
It isn't. There are only a few companies out there, a few TTRPG companies out there that can actually afford to do that, to pay somebody, for example, what would be a living wage to play test a game, you know, and to do it as many times as you need to. Mm-hmm. And whereas like with some businesses, I might say, well, if you can't pay your employees, then why are you in business? If we said that to TTRPG designers, there would only be one game.
Right. There would be one big game, and that would be the only one. Mm-hmm. So yes. And maybe that's one of the themes that we explore in the Means of Magick. So if that makes you mad, maybe you would like our games. Absolutely. I do want to ask you about the Kickstarter, but before I do that, I'm wondering if, and we didn't talk about this before, so I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about Moonpunk, just because, like I said, I know it is a different game. It is one folks should absolutely buy and try out. And I think that if they like that game, they would also like this game, because again, I think that you and Alex are passionate about this. And so it sounds like there's that underlying theme. So for our audience who may not know Moonpunk, do you mind talking just a little bit about it?
Of course. And, you wrote a wonderful module for Moonpunk, a great adventure. So if you buy the book, you can play one of Kristin's adventures in the game. So Moonpunk is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. It's very short, but we designed it with this zine aesthetic, and we hired a lot of people to come work and contribute their own voice to it, both artists and writers. So Moonpunk is a game where you are punks fighting fascism and oppression on the moon in a retro-futuristic kind of moon. And it was really heavily inspired by Robert Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which is kind of ironic because the politics in The Moon is a Harsh Mistress are not exactly the politics in Moonpunk. Moonpunk is definitely it's definitely much more of an anarchist game. There's even an anarchist A symbol on the front cover. So if you're picking up the game, it shouldn't surprise you too much what the game's about. It says so right on the cover, but you'd be surprised about the questions I've received. We made that game when we really wanted a game that felt punk and felt like punk politics, and not just, and this is not throwing shade at any other punk game, because I love punk games that are about music, but we didn't want it to just be about the music and the aesthetic. So we included in the game real world action guides to fighting systems of oppression in your own community. And these were inspired by zines that we got at punk shows. So we wanted it to be both a fun experience where you could feel powerful, you could feel like a nobody doing something and making a difference in your world. And we wanted it to be a semi-educational experience for the players too, because the way you gain experience as a player, other than failing, like in a Powered by the Apocalypse game, you gain experience by failing. But at the end of a session, you gain experience by taking those steps to spread the news about an oppressive system, to, I'm going to get all 4 of these steps wrong, it's going to be great, dismantle it, to organize other allies, and to replace it with something else. Because if you leave a power vacuum, something else is going to fill that vacuum. If I snap my fingers today and Facebook disappeared, like the corporation disappeared, there's going to be something to replace it. That money isn't, I would need to set up something else to replace that. It's a really bad example because I can't think of any like grassroots kind of thing that could replace Facebook, but Walmart, for example. Sorry for getting really political on your
no, this is what
podcast.
This is what we're here for.
Yeah, I wear my politics on my sleeve, obviously. I'm not trying to judge anybody who doesn't believe the same way I do. I just want a world where everyone can be, fed and clothed and have healthcare and be able to survive just because they're humans, not because they quote unquote deserve it.
Right. Which I would argue is not actually politics. It's just being a caring human being. But yeah, no, I one of the things that I really like about this show, in getting to talk with so many different designers, is that if there are people listening who maybe are new to indie gaming or new to storytelling games in general, it may seem like all that is out there is fantasy, barbarian type games, which, hey, I enjoy. They have their place. I'm not knocking them, but there are so many games out there that have heavy themes or even light themes, but they are made from like people's hearts. And it is so wonderful to talk to folks who just like believe in a theme and believe in the game and want to use the game as a tool to help start conversations, to help bring awareness. I love that. So please be as open as you want, because I really enjoy it.
Yeah, we try to be open in the book too. So you're gonna see, if you grab the book, when it comes out, you'll see information about environmentalism and what you can do and what corporations aren't doing and are doing to contribute to this climate crisis that we're in, as well as, of course, some of those anti-capitalist themes that you would find in Moonpunk as well.
Well, thank you for talking about Moonpunk. I would like, folks to know about it so they can give it a try. Cause I really enjoyed not just writing for it, I really enjoyed playing it. So
I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
yeah,
I feel like I learned so much from running that Kickstarter. We're doing so many things different with this Kickstarter. Like, for example, I am talking about it on a podcast, which I did not do with Moonpunk.
who knew
We
you had
also-
to do that?
You know, it is one form of advertising. I just like smack talked Facebook. We bought Facebook ads, which I feel skeezy about. I feel really skeezy about that.
Most people do it. All right. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people who do it.
Yeah, we got advice from people coming into this Kickstarter to do that ahead of time, and it turns out that works a little bit. So those have been up for a couple days, and we actually have a pre-launch where people can follow us before we launch it, because with Moonpunk we just launched it, which also you shouldn't do, apparently.
I have learned some of this recently as well.
Yeah, I went back and I looked at the Kickstarter for Moonpunk and I was like, how did we fund over our goal with what a mess we were? But hey, that's what punk rock's all about, I guess.
It is. And also Kickstarters, especially first time, it is like you hear about it being a stressful situation. If you're in indie gaming, you hear about it being stressful, but living through it is a whole nother situation, and you learn a lot. And some of it you can only learn, I think, by going through it. I have done one Kickstarter, so I don't mean to sound like an expert. I'm not. I'm in a similar boat of like doing the second Kickstarter and saying, I know more now, finally.
Yeah.
Okay, before we wrap up, I would love to hear anything that you can share about the Kickstarter for this game.
Yeah, sure. The Kickstarter launches on November 16th. I am extremely nervous about it, as you said. It is a nerve-wracking experience. And I'm so excited that we have this promo image that you can see, that image at the top of our Kickstarter, which you can see on the launch page too. And this was done by Toyin Agentumobi, or you can find his art on at Art of Morby, MORBY on Twitter, with awesome art direction by Aaron Radney, who is our third partner, who I feel like I should have mentioned him more, because he's been spectacular at getting us this really cool concept art that you'll also see in the Kickstarter. So you can, when that launches, you'll be able to go down, you'll see the concept art he made for us for our factions. And he really contributed a lot to us that really got the ball rolling with some of the lore that we put into that. So yeah, that launches on the 16th, and I will be panicking up through a whole month. You know, all of that fun Thanksgiving time, I will be eating pie and anxiety.
Yes, that sounds right. I do have one question. Will you have, and you don't have to say what they are, but in addition to your funding goal, will you have stretch goals as well that will be unlocked or announced, or are you doing one funding goal?
We're doing one funding goal, but if we get past our original funding goal, we will be contributing more to that will be money used to make the book look nicer with better art from more artists at higher pay. That is where that money is going to go.
That's fantastic. I love that you pay your artists well and that you will increase pay for folks working on the project.
Yeah, you'll see in that project, it's like almost all going to our artists.
Okay, well, Jess, thank you so much for joining me to talk about the Means of Magick. I'm very excited to back this game. Before I let you go, though, can you please tell folks again where they can find you on the internet if you want to be found, and any other projects maybe you have or things that you want folks to check out?
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been awesome. I was so excited when you invited me on. You can find me on Twitter at Jawska. That's JAWSKA. I don't only tweet about games, but I do tweet about games a lot. And you can find the project, just for a little quick cheat. It's bit.ly/Means of Magick with a K at the end. We want it to look fancy. It's our fancy magic. And those, you can also find our projects and our other games at wannabegames.com. There are links to Drive Through RPG and Itch there.
Wonderful. And listeners, you can check out our show notes, both for Jess's Twitter handle, where you can find out more information about their games, as well as the link to their Kickstarter. If you're listening to this episode on the day it drops, then it's likely that the Kickstarter dropped today, which if you need another reason to back it on the first day, it's also my birthday. So go ahead and back it for me as well. But thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Hello, it's Amber at the end of the show, and right off the bat, I want to apologize for the late release of this episode and last week's episode, which is coming out right after this episode. I don't know, there's lots of excuses, but I am not gonna list them. But here we are, and I'm really hoping that we get back on track. I do have vacation time coming up, so woohoo! Anyway, if you've been enjoying the show and enjoying Tabletop Crowd, please leave a rating or review on iTunes, Apple, or whatever it's called now. Apple Podcasts. I keep calling it iTunes, much like how I keep calling my Nintendo Switch my DS. But anyway, yes, please do that. It really helps the show itself out because of algorithms, and it's also just very validating as a content creator to know if people like their stuff they're doing. And I also want to give you guys shout outs, like, hi, thank you, and I'm going to do that right now. The Tabletop Babble team wants to give a special shout out to Meg B on YouTube. Yes, that's right. You can listen to our podcast on YouTube if you go to Geekspective's channel. You can also like and comment there as well, and maybe subscribe. Anyway, Meg, thank you so much for leaving all your comments. We've seen them all. We really appreciate the time you take out of your day to leave a comment. And the latest one, the one I have pulled up, is actually on episode 249, the Tabletop Crowd episode for Secret of the Vibrant Isle. Meg says, I dearly love listening to Tabletop Crowd. Thank you for this episode. I have been eyeing this TTRPG. Thank you, Meg. And, dear listener, I will see you in the next episode. Bye.